Iran pulled the trigger. After months of warnings, after 53 tankers anchored in open water, after pre-positioned mines and shore-based missiles in firing positions, and a final warning that Washington chose to treat as negotiating theater rather than operational reality, Iran pulled the trigger. Fast attack craft swarmed 2 commercial tankers transiting the Strait of Hormuz in the early morning hours. One vessel was struck by an anti-ship missile fired from Iranian coastal positions. One vessel was boarded by IRGC naval forces before a distress signal was cut off mid-transmission. The crews are unaccounted for. The cargo, approximately 2 million barrels of crude oil bound for Japanese refineries, is unaccounted for. And the strait, the 21-mile choke point through which 30% of the world's seaborne oil passes every single day, is now a combat zone, not a threatened zone, not an elevated risk environment. A combat zone where Iranian military forces have demonstrated they will fire on commercial vessels and seize crews without warning and without the diplomatic hesitation that every previous Iranian provocation retained as a signal of limited intent. This time there was no signal of limited intent. This time Iran fired, and America responded. And the response that America delivered in the 90 minutes between the attack being confirmed and the first American munitions reaching Iranian territory is the response that has shocked every government on Earth. Not because it was unexpected, because it was so precise, so overwhelming, and so clearly pre-planned that it answered a question that the entire world had been asking for months. Was America ready? America was ready. Stay with me. Because what Iran did, what America did in response, what the next 72 hours look like, and what this means for oil prices, for the global economy, and for every person on Earth who depends on energy that flows through 21 miles of water that just became a battlefield, is the story that changes everything. Here is the attack sequence with the precision that the stakes require. At approximately 0340 local time, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps naval units operating from fast attack craft staging areas on the Iranian coastline moved into the primary tanker transit lane of the Strait of Hormuz in a coordinated multi-vessel operation that involved between 12 and 15 fast attack craft converging on 2 commercial tankers simultaneously. The first tanker, a Panamanian-flagged supertanker carrying crude oil, was struck by an anti-ship missile fired from a shore-based coastal defense battery on the Iranian side of the strait. The missile impacted the vessel's engine room. The vessel lost propulsion and began taking on water. The crew of 23 issued a distress signal that was received and logged by the United States 5th Fleet Operations Center in Bahrain, before the crew activated their emergency beacon, abandoned the vessel. The second tanker, a Marshall Islands-flagged LNG carrier, was surrounded by Iranian fast attack craft, whose crews boarded the vessel in a seizure operation that cut off all external communications within 4 minutes of the boarding commencing. The crew of 27 has not been heard from since. The LNG cargo, sufficient to power a European city for 3 weeks, is in Iranian custody. The combined attack was coordinated, professional, and executed with a speed and precision that indicated extensive prior planning and rehearsal. This was not an impulsive action. This was the execution of an operational plan that had been prepared, rehearsed, and held ready for the moment that Iranian leadership decided the trigger condition had been met. The American response began within minutes of the attack being confirmed. Not hours, minutes. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, which had been operating in the Arabian Sea within operational range of the strait, had clearly been positioned and prepared for exactly this scenario. The response that followed in the 90 minutes after attack confirmation is being described by military analysts as the most concentrated demonstration of American precision strike capability since the opening night of the Iraq War in 2003. Wave 1. Tomahawk cruise missiles fired from American surface combatants and submarines struck 8 Iranian coastal defense missile battery positions that had been pre-identified and pre-targeted as the shore-based systems most capable of threatening commercial traffic in the strait's primary transit lanes. All 8 positions were struck within a 12-minute window. All 8 positions were assessed as destroyed or severely degraded in the post-strike battle damage assessment. Wave 2. F-18 strike aircraft launched from the Abraham Lincoln struck 4 Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps naval staging facilities on the Iranian coastline from which the fast attack craft that conducted the tanker attacks had operated. The strikes were executed with precision munitions that destroyed the facility infrastructure while limiting collateral damage to surrounding civilian areas. Wave 3. Electronic warfare aircraft suppressed Iranian air defense systems across a broad corridor of the Iranian coastline facing the strait, creating an air superiority environment that the initial strike waves had operated within and that subsequent operations could use if escalation continued. 90 minutes. 8 coastal missile batteries. 4 IRGC naval staging facilities. Iranian air defense suppression across the strait-facing coastline. And a message delivered not through diplomatic channels but through the GPS coordinates of destroyed Iranian military infrastructure that America had been pre-targeting for exactly this contingency and had executed the strike plan with a precision and a speed that left no ambiguity about American readiness or American resolve. The oil market opened into chaos. Brent crude spiked $42 per barrel in the first 30 minutes of trading following the attack confirmation. Not the American response. The attack. The American response, paradoxically, produced a partial reversal of the initial spike because the market assessed that American military action demonstrated the capability and willingness to keep the strait open, rather than allowing Iranian interdiction to persist. But partial reversal from a $42 spike still leaves oil prices at levels that cascade through every energy-dependent cost in the global economy within days. Airlines, which had been absorbing elevated fuel costs for weeks under the uncertainty premium that strait tensions had been generating, now face a fuel cost environment that makes a significant portion of their route networks economically unviable. Shipping companies implementing emergency war risk surcharges that add hundreds of dollars to the cost of every container transiting the region. Energy-intensive manufacturing industries making production allocation decisions based on input costs that changed overnight. And households in every major economy absorbing a fuel price increase that arrived without warning, without preparation, and without any government having a meaningful short-term policy response available. One attack, one American response. And the price of everything that moves, everything that is manufactured, and everything that is heated or cooled just increased simultaneously across the entire global economy. Iran's response to the American strikes was delivered through three channels simultaneously. The first channel was military. Iranian shore-based missile batteries that survived the American strike wave fired 4 anti-ship missiles at American naval vessels operating in the strait. All 4 missiles were intercepted by Aegis combat systems aboard American surface combatants. No American vessels were damaged. No American personnel were killed, but the intercept requirement confirmed that Iran retained significant strike capability after the American response and was prepared to use it against American military assets rather than limiting its military action to commercial shipping. The second channel was diplomatic. Iran formally notified the United Nations Security Council that American military strikes on Iranian territory constituted an act of war under international law and demanded an emergency Security Council session to address American aggression against Iranian sovereignty. Russia and China immediately expressed support for the Iranian diplomatic position. The Security Council session was convened within hours. Nothing was resolved. The Security Council never resolves anything when permanent members are on opposite sides. But the session established the diplomatic battleground on which the next phase of the confrontation will be contested. The third channel was economic. Iran formally declared the closure of the Strait of Hormuz to all commercial traffic until American forces withdrew from the region and American strikes on Iranian territory ceased. The declaration was the declaration that every energy market had been pricing as a tail risk for months. It was no longer a tail risk, it was a reality, and the oil price that had already spiked $42 on the attack moved another $20 on the closure declaration, $62 above where it was 24 hours ago. On a single night, from a single exchange of fire in 21 miles of water, America responded. Iran escalated. The strait is closed. The oil is not moving. The crews of 2 commercial vessels are unaccounted for. American and Iranian military forces have exchanged fire for the first time in a direct engagement since 1988, and every government on Earth is doing the same calculations simultaneously. Does this stop here, or does this become the war that every analysis said would be too expensive for either side to start? The answer to that question will be written in the next 72 hours in decisions made in Washington, in Tehran, and on the bridges of American naval vessels operating in waters where Iranian missiles are still flying. Subscribe now. Because the strait is closed, the world is watching, and the next 72 hours will determine whether this is the beginning of the end of the confrontation or the end of the beginning of something that nobody on Earth is fully prepared for.